The Valdivia Earthquake of 1960. On May 22, 1960, southern Chile was rocked by the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in human history, the Valdivia Earthquake. Measuring magnitude 9.5, it dwarfed nearly every other seismic event on record and unleashed destruction on a scale that spread across the globe. The quake struck in the afternoon near the city of Valdivia, shaking the region for more than 10 minutes. Buildings crumbled, rivers shifted course, and landslides buried entire communities. In Valdivia itself, nearly half of the city's structures collapsed, leaving survivors struggling amid dust, fire, and ruin. The ground shook so violently that the geography of southern Chile was permanently altered. The destruction did not stop with the quake. The massive seismic shift triggered landslides that dammed rivers and created lakes, while flooding drowned villages already in ruins. But the most devastating aftershock came from the sea. A colossal tsunami radiated outward across the Pacific Ocean, striking Chile's coast with waves as high as 80 feet and traveling thousands of miles. In Hawaii, Japan, the Philippines, and even as far as California, the tsunami caused deaths and damage, proving the earthquake's global reach. The human toll in Chile was catastrophic. Estimates suggest between 1,000 and 6,000 people were killed, with 2 million left homeless. Farmlands sank under salt water, crops were destroyed, and livestock drowned, compounding the humanitarian crisis with famine and poverty. Entire communities had to be rebuilt from scratch. The Valdivia earthquake also left a scientific legacy. Its unprecedented magnitude provided researchers with critical insights into subduction zones and tectonic plate movement. It remains the benchmark for understanding megathrust earthquakes, rare but immensely destructive events that shape continents and coasts. For the people of Chile, however, the earthquake was more than a scientific phenomenon. It was a day when the earth itself seemed to collapse beneath them, when survival meant clinging to whatever fragments of land, family, and hope remained. The Valdivia earthquake of 1960 remains etched in history as the most powerful reminder of the planet's ability to reshape human civilization in minutes. The Messina earthquake of 1908. In the early hours of December 28, 1908, southern Italy was struck by one of the most catastrophic earthquakes in European history. Centered in the Strait of Messina, between Sicily and Calabria, the quake and its ensuing tsunami annihilated the cities of Messina and Reggio Calabria, leaving more than 100,000 people dead within minutes. The earthquake, estimated at magnitude 7.1, struck at 5:20 in the morning when most residents were still asleep. In Messina, entire blocks of stone buildings collapsed instantly, trapping families beneath the rubble. Reggio Calabria across the strait suffered the same fate, with streets buried under fallen masonry and fires igniting amid the destruction. Survivors recalled the ground moving like waves of the sea, tossing people into walls and hurling carriages down streets. Moments after the shaking stopped, a devastating tsunami followed. Waves up to 40 feet high crashed against the coasts, sweeping survivors, ships, and debris back into the sea. The double blow of earthquake and tsunami left the strait littered with bodies and wreckage. The combination of destruction, fire, and flooding made rescue almost impossible in the first hours. The human cost was staggering. Entire families and neighborhoods vanished, with orphaned children wandering the ruins. Disease, hunger, and exposure claimed thousands more in the aftermath, as winter temperatures dropped and survivors were left without shelter. The Italian government, overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster, called for international aid. Naval ships from Russia, Britain, and the United States arrived to help with rescue and relief, marking one of the first major global humanitarian responses to a natural disaster. For Italy, the Messina earthquake was a national trauma. It not only destroyed 2 major cities, but also exposed the vulnerability of the country's infrastructure and the limits of government response. For the survivors, it was a haunting reminder of how swiftly life could be shattered. One moment asleep in bed, the next buried beneath stone or swept out to sea. The Pakistan Kashmir earthquake of 2005. On the morning of October 8, 2005, Northern Pakistan and the Kashmir region were struck by a massive earthquake measuring 7.6 in magnitude. Its epicenter was near Muzaffarabad, a city in Pakistani-administered Kashmir, and its destructive force rippled across hundreds of miles of mountainous terrain. Within minutes, entire villages were reduced to rubble, leaving tens of thousands dead and millions struggling to survive. The timing of the quake compounded its devastation. Striking just before 9 in the morning, it caught children in schools and workers in offices. Thousands of school buildings collapsed, trapping countless children beneath debris. Homes built of mud, stone, and unreinforced concrete disintegrated, offering little protection against the violent shaking. The human toll was staggering. More than 80,000 people were killed, with over 70,000 injured and nearly 4 million left homeless. Survivors faced crushing realities: families torn apart, towns erased, and basic infrastructure obliterated. Roads into the mountainous regions were blocked by landslides, making rescue and relief nearly impossible. Helicopters became lifelines, ferrying aid into remote valleys where survivors huddled without food, water, or shelter. As winter approached, the crisis deepened. The Himalayan foothills turned bitterly cold, and displaced families struggled to survive in makeshift tents. Outbreaks of disease threatened survivors already weakened by hunger and injury. International aid eventually poured in, with countries sending helicopters, medical teams, and supplies, but the scale of the disaster stretched even the most organized responses. The earthquake also exposed the vulnerability of rural communities in seismic zones. Poorly constructed buildings and lack of preparedness magnified the destruction. In its aftermath, the tragedy sparked renewed efforts to improve earthquake-resistant construction in Pakistan and highlighted the urgent need for global attention to disaster readiness. For the people of Kashmir, the quake was more than a moment in history. It was a generation-defining catastrophe. Families carried scars, both physical and emotional, from a day when the earth itself seemed determined to erase entire communities from the map. The Ecuador-Colombia earthquake of 1906. On January 31st, 1906, the Pacific coasts of Ecuador and Colombia were struck by one of the largest earthquakes in recorded history. With an estimated magnitude between 8.8 and 8.9, it shattered communities, reshaped landscapes, and triggered a massive tsunami that spread across the ocean, devastating shores thousands of miles away. The earthquake itself was centered off the coast near Esmeraldas, Ecuador. Coastal towns and villages were flattened, their wooden homes and fragile buildings no match for the violent shaking. In Guayaquil, Ecuador's largest city, docks and warehouses collapsed, while in Colombia, entire communities were swallowed by landslides. Survivors described the sea surging inland, dragging debris, people, and livestock into the waves. But it was the tsunami that gave this earthquake its truly global reach. Walls of water as high as 16 feet struck the coasts of Colombia and Ecuador within minutes. Ships were hurled ashore, and coastal settlements disappeared beneath churning waves. Hours later, the tsunami crossed the Pacific, striking Panama, Costa Rica, Mexico, Hawaii, and even Japan. Though weakened by distance, the waves still caused damage and fatalities, a chilling reminder of the interconnectedness of oceans. The human toll was devastating, though estimates vary. Thousands were killed in Ecuador and Colombia, with entire fishing communities erased. Infrastructure along the Pacific coast was ruined, isolating survivors and slowing aid. Disease and hunger followed in the quake's aftermath, as roads and ports were destroyed, making it difficult to bring relief to those in need. The 1906 Ecuador-Colombia earthquake became a milestone in scientific understanding. It was one of the first earthquakes and tsunamis studied globally, prompting early efforts to create tsunami warning systems. For the people of Ecuador and Colombia, however, it was less about science and more about survival. In one day, the ground and sea together obliterated towns, families, and futures, leaving scars that stretched across continents. The Peru earthquake of 1970, Ancash. On May 31st, 1970, Peru was struck by its deadliest natural disaster in modern history, the Ancash earthquake. Measuring magnitude 7.9, it not only devastated towns and cities along the coast and highlands, but also triggered a catastrophic landslide that buried entire communities. The quake struck off the coast near Chimbote, shaking much of northern and central Peru. Within seconds, buildings of adobe and stone collapsed across cities and villages. Coastal towns were destroyed, while mountain communities in the Andes saw schools, homes, and churches reduced to rubble. In Huaraz and Chimbote, thousands were crushed beneath falling structures, while hospitals and infrastructure were rendered useless. But the deadliest blow came not from the quake itself, but from the mountain above. The shaking dislodged a massive slab of ice and rock from Mount Huascarán, Peru's highest peak. The avalanche thundered down at terrifying speed, burying the towns of Yungay and Ranrahirca under tens of millions of cubic meters of rock, ice, and mud. Within minutes, Yungay, once home to more than 20,000 people, was almost completely erased. Only a handful of survivors, including children who happened to be at a circus on higher ground, lived to tell the tale. In total, the Ancash earthquake killed an estimated 70,000 people, injured more than 50,000, and left over 800,000 homeless. Survivors faced grim conditions with shattered infrastructure, contaminated water, and food shortages deepening the crisis. Rescue was hampered by blocked roads and destroyed communication systems, leaving isolated mountain towns cut off for days. The disaster spurred international relief efforts, but its sheer scale left scars on Peru that endure to this day. It also reshaped national policies on disaster preparedness and highlighted the risks of living in seismically active regions near unstable mountain slopes. For the people of Ancash, the 1970 earthquake was more than a tremor. It was an apocalyptic event where earth, ice, and stone conspired to erase entire communities from existence. The Mexico City earthquake of 1985. On September 19, 1985, Mexico City was struck by a catastrophic earthquake that exposed the dangers of rapid urban growth and fragile infrastructure. Measuring magnitude 8.0, the quake shook the capital for nearly 2 minutes, reducing thousands of buildings to rubble and claiming tens of thousands of lives in one of the worst disasters in modern Mexico's history. The epicenter lay off the Pacific coast of Michoacán, more than 200 miles away, yet Mexico City, built on a former lakebed of soft clay, bore the brunt of the destruction. The soil beneath the city amplified the seismic waves, causing skyscrapers and hospitals to sway and collapse as if they were made of paper. Entire apartment blocks pancaked, trapping thousands inside. Hospitals, schools, and government offices crumbled, leaving both civilians and first responders overwhelmed. The death toll remains disputed. Official government figures listed about 10,000 fatalities, but independent estimates suggest that as many as 30,000 people may have died. Hundreds of thousands were injured, and more than 250,000 were left homeless. The tragedy played out in real time on Mexican television, with images of collapsed buildings and desperate rescue efforts shocking the nation. Amid the devastation, Mexico City's citizens displayed remarkable courage. With official responses slow and disorganized, ordinary people, dubbed brigadistas, took to the streets to dig through rubble with their bare hands, rescuing thousands of survivors. Their heroism contrasted sharply with the government's perceived incompetence, fueling public anger and sowing distrust toward political leaders. The earthquake left a lasting legacy. It spurred stricter building codes, urban planning reforms, and the development of modern emergency response systems. It also galvanized civil society, empowering citizens groups and NGOs that would shape Mexican politics for decades. For the people who lived through it, however, the Mexico City earthquake of 1985 was remembered not in statistics or reforms but in personal loss. Families buried under ruins, neighborhoods erased, and a city brought to its knees by 2 minutes of shaking. The Nepal earthquake of 2015. On April 25, 2015, Nepal was struck by a devastating earthquake that reduced ancient cities to rubble and left entire villages destroyed. Measuring magnitude 7.8, the quake was the deadliest to hit the region in more than 80 years, killing nearly 9,000 people and injuring tens of thousands more. The epicenter lay near the village of Barpak in Gorkha district, but the destruction stretched across the country. In Kathmandu, Nepal's capital, temples, homes, and businesses crumbled into dust. The historic Durbar Square, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, was reduced to piles of brick and timber, and centuries-old towers collapsed before horrified onlookers. Survivors described choking clouds of dust filling the air and streets littered with bodies and debris. Beyond the cities, the rural toll was even more severe. Entire mountain villages were flattened by landslides triggered by the shaking. In Langtang Valley, an avalanche buried settlements, killing hundreds in minutes. On Mount Everest, the quake unleashed avalanches that swept through base camp, killing climbers and Sherpas in one of the deadliest single days in the mountain's history. The human cost was immense. Nearly 3 million people were displaced, with many forced to live in makeshift shelters under tarps as monsoon rains approached. Roads and airports were damaged, making it difficult for rescue workers and aid to reach the hardest-hit areas. Survivors faced hunger, exposure, and disease in the weeks following the quake. International relief efforts poured in, with countries sending rescue teams, medical supplies, and financial aid. Yet rebuilding proved slow and uneven, hampered by Nepal's mountainous terrain and fragile infrastructure. Even years later, many communities struggled to recover fully. The Nepal earthquake of 2015 highlighted not only the destructive power of seismic events in mountainous regions, but also the vulnerability of nations with limited resources to recover from catastrophe. For the people of Nepal, it was not just a natural disaster, but a national trauma, where lives, heritage, and history were shattered in less than a minute. The Alaska Good Friday earthquake of 1964. On March 27, 1964, Alaska was struck by the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in North America. Known as the Good Friday earthquake, it measured a staggering 9.2 in magnitude and shook the state for more than 4 minutes. Its immense force reshaped the landscape, generated tsunamis, and left communities devastated. The quake's epicenter was near Prince William Sound, about 75 miles east of Anchorage. The shaking was so intense that entire neighborhoods collapsed. In Anchorage, multi-story buildings split apart, streets cracked open, and houses slid from their foundations. In coastal towns like Valdivia and Seward, massive landslides and underwater slumps destroyed harbors and swallowed buildings. The earthquake also triggered tsunamis that raced across the Pacific. Alaska's own coastal communities were struck within minutes, with waves wiping out villages and killing entire families. In Crescent City, California, 4,000 miles away, the tsunami destroyed much of the harbor and killed 11 people. Other Pacific coastlines, including Hawaii and Japan, also recorded waves. The destruction in Alaska was immense, but the sparse population kept casualties lower than might have been expected. About 131 people were killed, yet the scale of physical devastation was almost beyond comprehension. Entire forests tilted from ground subsidence, and shorelines were permanently altered as land sank by as much as 8 feet in some places and rose more than 30 feet in others. The Good Friday earthquake left behind lessons as powerful as its tremors. Scientists gained valuable insights into plate tectonics and subduction zones, as the quake offered direct evidence of how tectonic plates collide and reshape the Earth. It also led to the establishment of the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, which has since saved countless lives. For Alaskans, however, the memory of 1964 remains personal. It was a night when the Earth moved with unimaginable force, reshaping towns, landscapes, and lives in just a few minutes. A reminder that the most powerful forces on Earth can strike without warning. Thank you for watching. If you learned anything, throw me a like and comment below on what you would like to see in the future. History never runs out of surprises, and neither do we. So subscribe and join me for the next dive into the archives.